we started with this laboratory thing because it's really huge, and it's been completely backwards, and it's addressing a community which is the most interesting community in the world, which is the scientists that are in the only kind of intellectual pursuit that I think is worth following today in humanity, much more than politics or art or anything. What is happening in science is fantastic. So lately we took a foray into this business of the hospitals, and we were surprised to be awarded these 3 projects, which are some prestigious universities, in which we were able to make a difference simply by talking to the doctors and understanding how the project works. This is a hospital that is approximately 1.5 million or so, that has a potential of growing up to 3 and starts all from this central space where the major auditorium and the major administration of the building is located into this wood object located inside. So all the circulation emerges from that. This is a quick description of how the plan would work. The master plan calls for an expansion of which we completed already this one, which is an extension for a laboratory. And then it continues over this up to the edge of the Philadelphia University of Pennsylvania Museum, which is a wonderful building that will probably be developed after a master plan that David Chipperfield created. So the whole thing emerges from this central space, and the rooms this is an ambulatory service. The rooms will be in the second ring, so to speak. So all the wayfinding and the location within the hospital is very easy because, from all of these different consulting rooms and offices, you can see the center space, as you can see in this image. University of Chicago is a building that, again, we won by contradicting the program. This was a tower that was 16-story height. Sorry. Actually, maybe this is enough. The site was originally located here, and the building was an extraordinarily tall building. And the one thing that I learned over the years in talking to scientists in general is that the evolution of the science, all sciences, is really more and more an attempt to dissolve the barriers between disciplines, which is a different concept than interdisciplinary work. In other words, that they have already concluded that the disciplines are completely obsolete. In other words, that you don't have an area of specialty, that the collaboration is not between you and the anesthesiologist, it's between you and a particle physics or a computer scientist, and that this thing is becoming more and more a mandate for them. The master planners have located this building in here, and in a vertical building, the only thing you achieve is sort of balkanization between. So our proposal was to turn the tower horizontally, cover the street, and have the largest medical plan in existence today, which is totally based on a very regular module in which we actually are designing the furniture and the furnishings for the whole plan such that the flexibility could be maintained. And then from floating over this thing, there is another point of connection that separates the rooms from the what we call the factory below, and creates a sky lobby that overlooks the city and becomes a new floor for the whole site. Stanford is a little bit different, but an evolution of that notion. The idea that you could create a module that could actually work for either patient rooms or or laboratories or classrooms, in an effort to overcome one of these other differences, which is between the School of Medicine that provides the staff for the hospital, and the hospital which is run independently. And so in trying to unify this thing, the idea was that by creating this series of modules, all of this project is generated by the fact that this building by Edward Larrabee Stone doesn't have seismic control, and it needed to be repaired. So the notion is that by having these modules, this module can start navigating around and populate not only the site of the hospital, but also the school, and become a repetitive element that then characterizes the whole area. Another building type that, as I said before, we've been always very interested in is also laboratories, a place that was always just nothing other than a factory and without any kind of level of architectural character. And these are two very recent ones. This is a lab for a very interesting liberal arts college in the upper part of Hudson, which is called Bard, that happens to have a president who is a music buff. And so the idea was that, once again, combining this thing, we could actually create a lab that was oriented towards the best part of the slope here, where the bosses are, with the scientists and the professors located around here, mounted on top of these objects that you see here, which are musical performing spaces. So there is this intermix between the artists, the character of the college as it is, and this new project of developing interesting rehearsal and research facilities for the sciences. And so there are smaller rooms and much larger rooms, and so the musicians come here and practice, and sort of the scientists and the kids that come to class and so on merge into this sort of general plan that develops around another interesting concept, which is that the mechanical plan in these buildings has always been thought as centralized because it's presumably less expensive. Instead of doing that, we've created this sort of kind of snake of several mechanical plants, so each of the scientists has direct control of their own supply of electricity, gas, and air conditioning, which adds an enormous amount of flexibility and potential for change. And these are views of the spaces from inside, which enjoy that view. Is it too? Should I? Yeah, I need an antibiotic. That's what. So this is only, again, because you cross these things. So tell me if you're bored, because I can cut at any point, okay? This is University of California, San Francisco. It's in the mountains. It's one of the most gorgeous places in the world. And as you probably know, was the first state that actually passed a proposition to develop stem cells research. It was immediately challenged in the courts, and during the Bush administration was actually completely stopped. But the force of the proposition that got approval, something like 75 to 25, was enormous, and so they couldn't actually avoid building it. But what they did was to put it in the back of the house, because the main access to the campus is in here. The hill goes up like this, and there are very important towers in here which are really tall. And I always thought that the decision of, by the way, this is all the service road, is where the mechanical plants are, all the truck docking and so on for the whole campus occurs in here. Now, the site was a site located here, and it was again a very tortuous and small site, as if you were hiding this thing. One of the proofs of the sort of the metaphor, as my friend was saying today, of the whole project is that the project, from being stem cell research, is now called regenerative medicine. So the idea was that instead of actually facing these towers that you can see here, which are several stories higher than the building itself, that the building develops in a series of platforms that follow the topography of the mountain and actually create a garden per principal investigator. So each of the groups that work together have a mission, which is to keep up a garden where they actually generate the moments of collaboration and so on. Each of the floors is a single floor, but it is stepped in a split level condition, half level, and develops along the street. And through that view, this view is overlooking the bay, and it has a rather spectacular view. And this is what you see walking in the ramp that connects the towers with an outdoor ramp that links all the labs directly with the students' access and so on, passing through the gardens. This is the view on the street. So from the street, if you have a magnetic card, you can also park and enter directly into each of the labs. And this is the building under construction, and it gets this form that it is almost unthinkable unless there are all these reasons why the building evolves in this fashion. Two more buildings here. One is the theater that that we did last year, which Alfred mentioned before, is interesting because this is a community that is populated by a lot of immigration in the UK. This is Leicester. And the traditions that result from this kind of diversity is an idea of a outside, is called the inside-out theater practice, which is that which I completely endorsed immediately, and what guided this was also a competition, the whole scheme, which is that they think, and it's apparently a very typical thing in places like Burma and India, that the theater practice is something that really happens to have a moment at 8 o'clock when you actually do the show, but the production and the whole interaction, the rehearsals, is really the life of the institution. And rather than being in the back of the house, they want this thing to be in the front of the house. So the theater in concept is this series of curtains, which of course ended up being not curtained, that is directly on the street level and becomes the sidewalk comes into the theater and works as an extension of the plaza and becomes a place of performance. Very awkward side, also very heavily determined by historic buildings. This is a gorgeous church that has a fantastic garden, which is in reality a cemetery that moves in this direction, feeding a couple of important buildings that are. This is the place where the orchestra plays, which is quite interesting. So the building is this large volume within which there are two audience houses, one red and one purple. This is 750 people, the other one is 350. And the plaza, as you can see here, I don't know, I'm seeing it distorted, but sort of penetrates in it. This window in good weather slides in. The whole structure is hanging from the roof. And and this is a view of how you see the form from outside. I mean, the louvers protected protect the glass from the sun. And to me, the most interesting part of this is something that was initially very much criticized, but that I think is quite interesting, is this notion that you can take all these interstitial spaces, which are the lobbies, of course, you walk around the theaters themselves. All of this facade is where the production of the equipment and the scenery and the customs and all the production of the shows is being done in this building, totally open to the public. And then there is a mezzanine, which actually is an inverted beam that is hung from the structure at the top that contains the movement of the facade, and where these sliding doors are run from. And then in the middle there is this object, which is a stage house with a fly house and the whole thing, but it's mounted into a series of elevators, so this element becomes completely open. This is the same level, the stage is at the level of the plaza, so when you can do several things. These are the two theaters. One is a kind of black box type, and the other one is a more formal theater, but both of them have the stages at the same time. The fly house folds itself upwards, and essentially you can have one single theater, not two, and they have this tradition of organizing carnivals and so on, which is quite remarkable. But also during rehearsal, you see the rehearsal from the street, and that's one of the events that occur in which the two theaters were connected, and this has prompted a number of very interesting experimental productions in area. I show this afternoon this building, which I'm not going to dwell too much on, which is a very interesting project, because it's essentially taking the typology of a very normal high-rise building and inverted it, such that to create at the top, to place at the top the largest amount of area for rent, and at the same time provide two things. I mean, decongest the area on this very tight sort of informal network of passages, which is the medieval pattern of London, and at the top creating a very large winter garden that is offered to the city to look at it from a high elevation, completely without charge, and establishing a way of returning to the city a vantage point that otherwise it wouldn't have. This is a site where the building is being built now. This building has been already demolished, and this is how the building would look like finished. And it has a couple of, so this is the winter garden at the top. The building leans towards the town, so it serves shades from the side, and the architecture is a series of louvers that create this arch, making a kind of reproduction of the Kew Gardens at the top, and some views from the streets and how the spaces end up looking like. And this is the view that I think it has to be a public view. I mean, it's a kind of thing that you never get in a peak-like building, where at the top you have a very little facility for the tenants of the building, and just creating this as an opportunity for people to gather and see the city from is quite remarkable, I think. And finally, there is this thing, which is my second building in my place of origin. I don't know if that's a proper expression, but which is the National Airport. And it's the tiniest. Uruguay is, for the last 150 years, no, a little bit less than that, 100 years, has had a steady level of population. It has 100% literacy. It has an extraordinary university, and it's really, truly a wonderful place, completely left out, dominated by the economies of Argentina and Brazil, two enormous countries that completely dominate the region. So the place is a place that looks and acts almost as a negotiator between these two places. Is the equivalent of the common market in Europe is located here. It's like the Brussels of Europe. So hopefully there will be a development of the air infrastructure, air transportation infrastructure, which, if I read this correctly, is now served by this building, which is a very modest building that was built in the 40s. The project tries to make it into something much larger than what it really is. Architecturally, what it does is it takes this notion of the hills. I mean, Uruguay is all built by a series of hills, which are really not mountains, but really soft elevations like this. And the idea was to create a very large portal, almost, within which the airport is located, in an effort to achieve one basic goal, which is to cover the outdoor spaces where the workers work. I mean, people move luggage, the planes themselves. So it has a very important presence in its character, and as I say, the building itself is only from here to here. But the key for that is that all this enormous span, which is close to 400 meters or so, is 1,200 feet, is supported by a sheet of glass that defines the space in the center. It is a shape which is not a static geometric shape. It changes, to my surprise, really greatly as you walk around. It has this enormous a canopy where the planes come in and park inside, and it looks like an object that you cannot disregard, neither from the air nor from the street. And the second thing that it has, you can see here what the glass is doing, and then it has these ramps that allow you to come up to a terrace, something that has been completely lost out in modern airports, that still in Uruguay exists. This notion that when you it's far, the place, so you go with your mates and with your family members and say goodbye and receive them and so on. So it creates this sense of public access to these exterior ramps that lead you to a terrace where you can see the plains and see the landscape in the horizon. And as you can see, the building really looks very differently from very many different locations. This is the main canopy, and it's also an incredibly economical building. It's all made in fiberglass. It's very light. It's all fabricated with products that could be afforded in the small economy of Uruguay, but still has a presence, I think, which is quite interesting. So these are the ramps that lead you to the terrace. So you walk up this way and you kind of walk around this thing, that there are food and beverage services in there. This is the main drop-off and departures. This is from the inside, and the structure of the glass is what supports the roof. This is the arrivals hall. So you come back in here, but you still see the configuration of this white cloud floating over you. And this is the place where the families come. There is, in the center of this space, there is a very large restaurant, a tradition that still exists. And so this becomes a place that has the counterpart of the terrace outside to see it. I don't think I have any more to tell you tonight.